I am new to Kentucky. My wife and I have now been here about 2.5 years, working full-time at this place called the Council on Post-Secondary Education, which is a mouthful, and I thought that I might use at least a few minutes of my time to tell you what that thing is and what we do. In state law that was adopted in 1997 in a bill in that year called House Bill 1, then Governor Paul Patton persuaded the legislature essentially to restructure higher education. And the restructuring involved a number of very big pieces, the most significant of which was what I call a divorce and a marriage. The community colleges were divorced from the University of Kentucky, and then they were married up with the then freestanding technical colleges to create today what is KCTCS, the Kentucky Community and Technical College System. Part of our responsibilities is oversight and coordination of their work, but we also got all that competition out there. We also work directly with the 8 public universities, which includes UK, U of L, Murray, Moorhead, Northern, Eastern, Western, and K-State. We serve as the state's licensing enterprise for all of the private and independent colleges that are not-for-profit, and those for-profit colleges and universities that offer at least a bachelor's degree. And in addition to all of that, our responsibilities include managing the state's basic adult education program. That's the GED program. We deliver that program in all 120 of Kentucky's counties. This past year, we'll have graduated from that program a little over 10,000 Kentuckians with a GED, and about 20% of those folks we anticipate will go on to some sort of post-secondary education, either the community colleges or one of our four-year institutions. So that's kind of just a quick, incomplete overview, but the major things that we do at the Council. Among other things, in fulfilling those responsibilities, we coordinate the annual requests for dollars, the budget request to the legislature on behalf of all the public universities. And among our least pleasurable responsibilities is the statute says that we determine tuition. So if you have youngsters that are attending, or not so young folks attending any of our public universities, and you think the tuition is too high, you can throw rocks at me. In any event, I thought what I would do is, beyond this little thumbnail sketch, is talk to you a little bit about what's going on today in education, both K-12 and higher ed. And the reason I'm going to talk about K-12, I hope, will become apparent in a moment. But first, I thought what I would do is, just by a show of hands, how many of you have youngsters that are currently attending a public school in K-12, or grandchildren? There we go. How many have sons or daughters or relatives attending any of our public universities or community colleges? So a pretty high proportion of you. As of last year, about 4 in 10 of young people graduating from our high schools. In other words, they've done everything that was required of them. They took all the classes, they got the grades they needed, and they earned that high school diploma. 4 in 10 of those young people who chose to go to college showed up and discovered that they needed remedial classes in one or more subjects. One other statistic. When we evaluate our performance, one of the things that we look at is the graduation rates of our students. What proportion of students who enter as freshmen earn either an associate's degree, which is a 2-year degree from our community colleges, within 3 years, or our bachelor's degree within 6 years. We used to think of these things as 2 and 4 years, but for a variety of reasons, it's now 3 and 6. The answer is that students who enter our institutions prepared, in other words, ready to take college credit generating courses, are graduating at twice the rate of those students who are entering our institutions underprepared and in need of remediation. So, from our perspective in higher education, we have come to understand that if we are going to be successful in getting more of our students to whatever their finish line is, then we have to help K-12 be more successful, because their success translates into our success. And our success translates, obviously, more importantly, into our students' success. And so the question is, what has caused this problem of students finishing high school, earning that diploma, and thinking that they are ready for the rest of their lives, whether they go into the workforce or they go to college, and discovering, and we're talking now not about the kids who choose not to go, but the kids who choose to go to college, 4 in 10 of them show up and all of a sudden are in a remedial class. The answer is not that they suddenly got dumb over the summer between the end of high school and the start of college. The answer, frankly, is that we have not been teaching the right stuff in high school and in elementary school. And as a consequence, our young people who are doing all that we're asking them to do are showing up inadequately prepared and not ready to do college level work. And you say, well, how could that have happened? Well, I don't know. There's probably 1,000 reasons. But the good news is that 2 years ago, the legislature here in Kentucky took a leading position in the country in passing some new legislation, affectionately called Senate Bill 1. We don't have fancier names here in Kentucky. But this bill was as important, if not more important, than the landmark reform legislation passed back in 1990 called CURA. The new legislation says that those of us who manage our education systems, both higher ed and K-12, number one, have to work together. Number two, we have to define a system that has standards, and standards are just the words that we use to define what we expect students to know at the end of kindergarten, first grade, third grade, fifth grade, 10th grade, 12th grade. And to make sure that those standards are aligned with what we expect students to know when they get to college, so that they can take credit generating classes upon arrival as freshmen, whether it's at the community college or at our 4-year institutions. That alignment, which this statute now requires us to do, simply did not exist before. And Kentucky is not alone in this. This is true across the country. And so over the last 2 years, we have been working very closely with the Commissioner of Education, Terry Holliday, and his staff, and folks all the way down into local school districts, local schools, at every level, from elementary through to high school and middle schools, to build this notion of an aligned set of standards. The term that you will hear is something that has now become a national movement called the adoption of Common Core standards. There are now 45 states that have agreed to implement this same notion, and in fact to adopt fairly common, from state to state, nearly identical standards. When these nationally developed standards, when I say national, it wasn't done by the U.S. Department of Education. It was done individually by groups of states participating together through a national effort. Kentucky college faculty, over 100 of our faculty, actively participated in drafting the Common Core standards that are being used not just here in Kentucky, but in other parts of the country. And so there is now a much higher likelihood, and these standards, by the way, are being implemented this fall. So your kids, those who are attending public schools, will start to discover that they are going to be learning different things and probably at different times. If you have a son or daughter who graduated a couple years ago, and remember that they took geometry at a certain point, well, your child who's now enrolled might be taking geometry a year or two earlier. Or if they're in elementary school, they may be learning basic algebra in 5th or 6th grade. Now, I'm not sure of what the timing of all of this is, but the point is that the standards are being moved in terms of time, but also one other thing is really important. What we discovered in making all the evaluations that have led to this effort is the fact that we were trying to teach our young people so much, so many different aspects of mathematics, of science, of history, that their knowledge, using an old metaphor, was a mile wide but only an inch deep. And so the new standards say, let's teach less stuff, but let's go deeper, so that when the kids get to college or go out into the world of work, they will have a much deeper knowledge of the most important elements of these subjects. And we believe that that too will help alleviate this lack of alignment problem that exists or has existed for so long. Now, in dealing with this, the standards alone, simply adopting them, is not the cure-all of all of the challenges that we have. And so part of our mission in this very pretty blue book that we left on your chairs is a new strategic agenda that was just adopted by our council. We're obligated to do these every 4 or 5 years, and what we're essentially doing is taking goals that were set for higher education back in 1997 when the reform legislation was enacted. And those goals were set for the year, what seemed like an eternity away, the year 2020. And so these periodic strategic agendas are done to say, here's what the goal is in 2020, here's where we are currently on different measures of performance, what do we need to do to get us to the finish line during that period. So that's what this strategic agenda is. But the very first element in this, and there's 4 pieces to it, is all about student readiness. And you say, well, that's great, but what does higher education have to do with K-12? We don't run the schools, we don't hire the teachers, we don't hire the principals, we don't run the school boards. Okay. Here's what we do, however. About 90% of the teachers in this state are educated at our institutions. We decide who is admitted to a teacher ed program. We decide what to teach them. And we decide what they need to demonstrate in order to earn their degree. What we know is that we need to elevate the quality of our teaching corps and the effectiveness of our teaching corps. And so at every one of our campuses, consistent with the strategies that are set forth in this new strategic agenda, there will be a new emphasis and new focus on what we can do in higher ed to help K-12 be successful. One is to attract high-performing students into teaching, to give them the very best training and preparation we can to deal with the challenges that they're going to confront as classroom teachers, and to get them ready to implement these new Common Core standards. Part 2 is to take the existing core of teachers that we have. We have over 45, close to 50,000 teachers in the state. What we know is each of them are required every year by contract to take something called professional development, kind of on-the-job training. But most of the professional development that has been delivered to classroom teachers across the country is ineffective. And the proof of that is that student performance has not been significantly improving, even though we keep throwing all of this training that doesn't do much for them at teachers. And so part of our agenda is to get our universities involved in providing relevant, effective, meaningful professional development for classroom teachers. To say to our teachers who are out in their classes, come back to our campuses not just for an alumni event or a football game, but come back to get refreshed in your discipline, to learn new pedagogical techniques, teaching techniques, to learn how to use new assessment tools that we're using to improve and monitor student performance. And finally, we are going to be increasing, as part of these strategies, opportunities for youngsters while they are in high school to start to earn college credit. You will hear various models: dual credit, early college, middle college, a new program that's being piloted this fall, including here, I think, in Franklin County, called the board exam system, which will allow youngsters who volunteer to go into this program essentially to complete their high school education by the end of 10th grade and earn a diploma, which will then allow them to do one of two things: either go directly to college without need of remediation, or go into the workforce. It's one choice. The other choice is to stay in high school and use their junior and senior years to take advanced placement or international baccalaureate curriculum and then apply to more selective colleges upon graduation as seniors. But there are other models. Middle college, kids who are in high school are taking their junior and senior year on community college campuses and earning their high school degrees and earning college credits simultaneously. The first group of these kids, which were out in Paducah, 2 of 30 of the kids that were in the first cohort not only got their high school diplomas, but had a complete associate's degree on the day they graduated from high school. Think of what that saves their family in terms of dollars if they want to go on and earn a bachelor's degree. So increasing those opportunities across the state is part of these strategies. Anyways, to conclude, although I could obviously go on for a much longer period of time, you are, by your participation in this program, identified by your employers or your friends as leaders in this community. And we need your leadership to help the community and your neighbors and your colleagues at work, number one, to understand how important it is that more of our young people become more highly educated. Number two, to understand that these new standards, which I talked about briefly, are going to cause a little bit of disruption in the first year or two. And so you may have kids coming home and telling you, Mom or Dad, it's just too hard. They're making me do this stuff. Stick with it. It will make an enormous difference in their lives and in their future, and ultimately in the future of our state and our country. So I hope this is a little bit helpful. I'm delighted to have had this opportunity to come speak to you, and congratulations to each of you for completing this program. You will make a difference throughout Frankfort and Franklin County. Thanks a lot.